If you think that moral reasoning is something we do to figure out the truth, you will constantly be frustrated by how foolish, biased, and illogical people become when they disagree with you. But if you think about moral reasoning as a skill we humans evolved to further our social agendas, to justify our own actions, and to defend the teams we belong to, then things will make a lot more sense.
Welcome to Anxiety Club. My name is Karl Benitez.
And my name is Trevor Pogue, and this week we have none other than Dan Gerler. Dan is the founder of OnlineShoes.com, which was his father's company, and I know you're probably thinking, why the hell would I want to listen to a shoe man talk? We're going to answer that question in this week's episode. He's a fascinating person. He has deep philosophical thoughts on everything from the idea of compromise to the idea of what a corporate culture should look like within a larger and larger enterprise, and getting to hear his story on how he took this little Red Wing shoe shop, or two shoe shops that he inherited from his dad, and turning it into this multi-million-dollar business that was largely very successful, is pretty fascinating to hear him tell it in the first person.
He's basically a philosopher in a CEO's body in a lot of ways, and he CEOs in an interesting manner that's thoughtful and very human orientated. And we get into some interesting conversations with him, and we hope you enjoy the story of Dan Gerler.
Without further ado, here's Dan.
Dan Gerler, thank you for joining us on Anxiety Club today.
Happy to be here.
You chose a heady quote to start out with. Do you want to unpack this quote for us a little bit?
Please do, Dan.
It sounds it sounds like you're a very currently present-minded with how people discern morality and truth, and I'm wondering what this quote means to you, and extrapolate into current events if you feel so inclined.
Sure. Well, I think this really shows, and it reflects on society today, the deep divisions that people have, and that they've always had, either due to their religious orientation or their political orientation, and the intolerance that often exists for people that differ in our views. So if you think about issues, whether it's the death penalty, abortion, free trade, these are things that people have very different opinions on, and become very righteous about their opinion, will seldom change their view through discussion. And so I think that's interesting. I think we all have to reflect that there's a lot of people that are very smart that have opposing views to our own. It's not to say that everybody's right or moral equivalency, but I think taking that seriously and being able to understand other people's framework for moral reasoning is really important, and can clarify where some of it can help understand why people think the way they do. Even though you might not choose to subscribe to that point of view, you understand the reasoning, and it's not that it's random. I mean, they have structured values and beliefs. And Jonathan Haidt has 6 moral values that he speaks to, and it kind of shows, or moral bases, I should say, and different groups, and especially from a political orientation, the right and the left, tend to subscribe to slightly different ones.
Where did you first come to the quote? Where did you first come across it?
In Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind, which is, I'd say, one of the top 3 books I've ever read.
Really?
It's amazing, and just very, very interesting, unique perspective, and he's become very popular.
Is this one you hold on to and come back to again and again?
Yeah.
Yeah. To sort of reanalyze and reorientate yourself?
It's a very densely packed book.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different content, not just about righteousness, but about human thought process and other things, empirically based, citing recent investigations. So he really comes from a knowledge standpoint, and I was just fascinated by it.
Where did you first develop this sense of curiosity and depth? Was it earlier that you had it, or was it something that you cultivated?
No, it's definitely something that I think I'm just by nature kind of an analytic person, and I was always inclined and intrigued by understanding and how humans interact, and those kind of things have just, I think, interested me since I was a kid, or certainly since a teenager.
Were your folks like that?
My mom may have been a little bit that way, but I think I just had a deeper sense of that, and I just think I enjoy it so much. I always feel like it's an expansive process of, getting a better understanding of life and human interaction. And this book actually had a pretty profound impact on the way I think and kind of really appreciating other positions more deeply. And I think, Pew Research just came out with some research that they did, and it showed that the majority of Democrats, like now under Trump, are fearful of the results and so forth, which I think we've heard a lot of in the news. But it also shows that people of the right persuasion were very fearful under Obama. And people on either side, I think the people today on Trump's side, what are you worried about? This is a fine guy, and and I think under Obama, the Democrats would have the lack of appreciation how people of different orientation.
Because it's an inability to understand the opposition's point of view. I
think it's not. In some ways, on the surface level, you can say it's an inability.
Okay.
But I think it's more a lack of understanding of some of the moral considerations and the emphasis that different people put on things. And so for the right, for example, loyalty is a really sanctity are values that are very important. And for the left, those are not things that naturally kind of arise as predominant kind of concerns. And so you can see a lot of those social issues that we dealt with could be much more concerning to people on the right, is thinking that, and they're much more for keeping a steady state, and all these changes are more disturbing to them because they hold sacrosanct some of the values and so forth. They feel that some of these things compromise it. I'll give you just a small example, and it's flag burning. So, on the left, flag burning, certainly I certainly think of many instances in the 70s in the anti-war movement against the Vietnam War. There may have been some earlier, but that's kind of what I think of as kind of the inception of the flag burning domestically. And there's nothing thought of it. I mean, it's just, okay, so here's this cloth, some cotton, we got a little bit of paint on it to create a flag design, and this kind of, it's against our country and our position, but it doesn't hold the symbolic value that it holds for the right. So for people on the right, the sense that this is something that men have died for in our country, this is kind of essentially sacrosanct.
It's like you're burning an idea rather than an object.
Yeah. And a strongly held kind of view and committed kind of opinion.
This is really fat. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we decided we wanted to talk to you. For those of our listeners who don't know, you made a living out of selling shoes. And so to start off with this great political philosophy.
Sorry about talking about burning flags.
Yeah, it's like, all right, where are we going with this? I mean, I think that's one of the most interesting things of this interview, and what we're hoping to talk about today is how you, who thinks like this, made a living in an industry that was what we think of as relatively kind of boring. Mm-hmm. Shoe sales. Yeah. What's more mattresses might be a more boring industry. So I think we want to start with what that was. We want to start at the beginning. We want to start with your dad's story. You mentioned that he came over from Israel to start this shoe business. So I think we'll start with your story, with your dad's story when he first came over and decided to get into this shoe sales.
Sure.
So let's start there.
So I don't think my dad came to the States thinking he's going to be, that he's going to own shoe stores.
I'm going to make my millions.
Yeah. But as an immigrant and coming here, he tried a few different things before ending up owning 2 shoe stores. And I think he had a friend in New York who had a shoe store, and so he kind of knew about that. And he was looking at franchise opportunities, dealership opportunities, and somehow this struck him as a good opportunity. And he started in 1968 with a store in Northeast Seattle on 65th and Roosevelt, and just kind of slowly built it into a good business. Northeast Seattle at that time, which was late 60s, early 70s, was actually a pretty blue-collar area.
What was it called?
It would be kind of the Wedgwood.
No. What was the shoe store called?
It was called Red Wing Shoes.
Oh, Red Wings.
Yeah.
What we now know as Red Wings? Boots?
Yep.
Same thing?
Same thing.
Okay.
Yep. So definitely for people that are on their feet, working people, that was the source, and brought in some other lines as well. But that was the primary manufacturer that was sold, and that was the name of the store as
So
well.
in a blue collar area, you're making blue collar shoes. You're making big, burly leather boots that you can buy once. And I'm actually fairly positive that my uncle, who lives on Friday Harbor and is a burly, woodsy dude, is like, yeah, you buy a pair of Levi's and a pair of Red Wings, and those are your shoes and pants for the rest of your life.
Go work in the forest industry.
So is it a cobbler? Are you making shoes and
No.
fixing shoes? You're just selling the boots. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And these are boots. They're not just boots. I mean, they're shoes. So, like the post office, Red Wing had special postal shoes.
Ooh.
And and the shoes, they're really designed so. For example, with postal workers or people that are on concrete a lot, a wedge sole with what was then a crepe type material was really thought to be optimal for people to have comfort, and they were known for comfort. And they were more expensive than other products, but they lasted a lot longer. And the repeat business on them was just phenomenal. People would just come back. They were also into hunting boots, some hiking. So it was diversity, but certainly not in, slightly casual in a few patterns, but certainly no dress or heavy casual.
Was he
type
an
of stuff.
entrepreneurial man, always trying
Yeah,
to
he
build
was.
and expand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He definitely did, and he had some prior experience that also was along those lines, entrepreneurial. He actually, in Israel back then, some fire stations, for example, were privately owned, and so he was involved with with that. And
Okay. So he knew business.
Yes.
From a different industry per se.
Right. Yes.
And when did you get integrated in? Were you just born into the shoe store? Laying under the counters and your mom's
causing
working the
trouble.
back like, Dan, go help this guy polish shoes.
Eventually, they just say we need to start making Dan a little bit useful because he's
yeah, I don't know that they ever felt that they got useful. Much
yeah,
out of
right.
it.
It's still a work in progress.
They tried. But I started being around, the stores. I mean, I was 11 when my dad opened that store, and so I had some exposure. Visit him in the stores and spend a little time in there, and especially when he got overwhelmed, I'd sometimes, out of necessity, be told to help somebody, and kind of learned it a little bit that way. But I wasn't heavily involved at that point, when I was 10 or 12.
Yeah.
And then I became more involved over, doing some summer projects. You need to have, the store remodeled or things like that. And then just working a bit in the stores, helping put away inventory now and again. But I wasn't overly involved in the day-to-day business of the stores.
When did it become the and Sons?
Probably about when he incorporated, which I think was in 1974.
What does that mean? What does incorporated mean?
Meaning that, as opposed to just having the business and doing everything under his own name and directly through his personal income taxes, it means that you have a corporate entity under which you run the business.
Are you seeing your involvement? Are we seeing your involvement start to become more as the business is starting to increase and go in the direction that, as a business owner, you would want it to go, where you're like, oh, now we can actually incorporate. Now we're doing these renovation projects as opposed to just sort of like keeping our head above water.
So with respect to me personally,
Yeah.
I think for me, there's a correlation here between involvement and age, strong correlation that I was getting older. So it would be more practical as opposed to having an 11-year-old kid around the store.
Sure.
You could have a 17 or an 18-year-old person coming in and so forth. But my dad wasn't looking for me to necessarily join the business or take it over at some future point.
So you tacked on the and Sons. You're like, hey, we should make like and Sons. And then
It was never, this is all going to be yours one day.
No, well, I guess ultimately, right?
Yeah.
From a standpoint that
But back then,
my thinking wasn't along those lines that I would take it over, and nor was he. He wanted me really to focus on my education,
Okay.
and very supportive, and just wanted me to spend as much time as I could studying and finding a career that I would be happy with, and certainly not in the business realm.
But the
what
fast-paced
went
lifestyle,
wrong,
the allure of the shoe business pulled you back in.
I don't think it was the fast pace that necessarily did it at that point. But I went to the UW, and I got 2 majors, one in philosophy and one in psychology and cognitive psych area. And I was really debating what I wanted to do after I got my bachelor's, if I wanted to pursue a graduate degree in law, in philosophy or in psychology. And I debated for a long time, and I finally decided that I wanted to go to law school. And I came in as a pre-law, and I'd kind of forgotten in the process and all my excitement about studying these other subject areas. And so I made a decision to go there, and I started working at a firm downtown, just doing just small tasks and stuff to assist, but to gain exposure. And I was going to apply, and my dad had a massive stroke. This is in the summer of '82, and he was no longer able to resume in the business. And I kind of stepped in, definitely thinking this is temporary, but it has some legs.
What did that conversation look like when you found out your dad had the stroke? Was it the business needs to go on? Were you talking with your mom, or was this someone else?
No, they were divorced, so it was pretty much kind of, what direction did I want to go in at that point. And when
who called you and said, "Will you step in"?
There's no call. Mm-hmm. He had a manager that was overseeing 2 stores, and he was capable of running it. And then, I just needed to make a financial decision in terms of, am I going to try to preserve this business? Am I going to try to sell it right away and continue with kind of the plan that I had? And I think just from a practical standpoint, it made sense that I was going to have to ramp up my involvement for some period of time and understand what I wanted to do with it and what the opportunities were. And so I certainly thought of it as a temporary endeavor when I stepped in. I never mentioned that I would kind of
interim, and then you would get back on the life path that you had sort of thought that you were going to be going down. So sort of graduate work in academia in general. Was that your ultimate sort of end game?
Yeah, I was looking to get a PhD and teach, and then also with law, I was hoping actually to end up teaching as well. My goal was to teach constitutional law. A lot of steps that you have to go through, and there's some good fortune to be able to accomplish that aside from your own ability. But that was what I was interested in. Obviously, constitutional law certainly ties into philosophy, and so it was just always an area that I found really interesting.
Sure.
I think that Watergate was obviously a very dominant kind of event during my high school years, and I watched a lot of the hearings, and I think that probably, I just thought about that recently, I think that had a pretty big impact upon my interest in law.
Was it a resignation to find yourself back in the shoe store?
No, I always thought that, and it's really not back, it was really kind of like I entered, because before I was kind of a marginal, kind of coming in and doing things.
We're picturing an 11-year-old child behind the till, measuring people. You got, you're
I'm not ready for this.
You're taking measurements.
Time's now, boy.
Taking a cigarette break in the back alley. You're all exhausted.
In reality, we're in the 80s.
No, this would be early 70s.
Early 70s. Okay.
Yep.
And then, you're actually sort of stepping in as a what you believe to be an interim managerial running the company. And where is the company?
So let me just clarify something about the timing of this. So when you were talking about 11, that was kind of late 60s, early 70s. When I took over the business was in 82.
Okay.
And where was it at that point? Just still a bunch of shoe stores?
2 shoe stores.
2 shoe stores?
Yeah, one in north end Seattle and the other in Linwood.
Okay. And at what point did it no longer become interim? At what point were you like, turns out I'm a shoe store owner?
I think probably about 5 years into it.
Okay.
And I grew the business quite a bit. And it got to the point where I was a little less apprehensive. There's kind of the stock market crash in 87. Some of those things made me think, well, I'll do it. And I was thinking about expansion. And I wasn't sure exactly what the end goal was going to look like. I didn't have, obviously, that sense that I would be growing an internet business.
Yeah.
And, but my eye was to have a very significant business. I wanted to create something that would be interesting to be involved with, would have some serious dimension to it. And so I looked, starting probably in the mid to late 80s, I was looking at concept stores, European footwear, comfort footwear for walking and so forth. And I visited a lot of stores around the country, Chicago, Berkeley, numerous cities, kind of looking at shops and concepts that were out there. And the concept probably would have been close to kind of like a walking store. If you're familiar with the walking stores, it's kind of a chain. And I looked at that, and then I had several manufacturers that wanted me to open up their product brand stores, so like Red Wing. I mean, New Balance was very interested in my doing that. Rockport was also toying with the idea of concept stores at that time. But I really didn't want to be beholden to a certain manufacturer. And I'd already saw that with Red Wing, that was a limiting factor. And I wanted to go a little bigger than that. And so I really looked at the catalog business for a significant period of time. Bought a ton of books, read up on it, and kind of as I was in the latter period of kind of reading about it, the internet was just kind of percolating a little bit. This is kind of coming into the mid-'90s. And I just thought that sounded interested, and that I wanted to pursue that. And I certainly didn't feel like this was a sure bet. This is a slam dunk.
The internet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just kind of approached it from the standpoint of, it sounds really interesting. I think there might be an opportunity here, and I will take a step in that direction, and I will assess kind of how successful we are, and then I will decide how far we want to go with it. And it just very quickly showed promise.
What was being sold on the internet at that point? Were you one of the first ones to get into that, particularly in the shoe category?
Yeah, in the shoe category for sure. Amazon started in 95.
Okay.
I'd say that, a lot of things had occurred on the internet and stuff, but in terms of really
Kidneys,
e-commerce,
guinea pigs, exotic animals.
in terms of what we think about
Black
retail
market,
and e-commerce, not very much.
Yeah.
And the channels that we know now, and the different marketing channels that exist, I mean, none of that. People weren't doing email blasts. People, weren't really using search for e-commerce. I mean,
what did the first website look like?
It's funny. The first website was actually set up on a store kind of a vision. So it was set up as a multi-floor kind of site.
Yeah.
And you'd have different product categories. You'd have clearance. It could be your basement. And then you think about women's on the first floor, men's on the second. There's an elevator.
Perfect. Yeah,
A
it's like
physical space that you enter on the internet.
someone's not going to know how to get from room to room unless we show a little, animated guy walking around. That's hilarious. So you saw this potential opportunity and you started to pursue it. I guess. Why did you want to do this? Because you still don't necessarily sound like someone that is a shoe salesman, but you're at the same time throwing yourself into this expansion mindset that you're taking this company to new levels.
Yeah, I think I was probably in, I guess, 95 when we started looking at it, 96. I was already 38. So I probably, as I thought about that, I wasn't thinking of, maybe this would be a good time to jump into law school again.
Yeah, you're no longer this sort of like wishful,
the young buck,
undergrad that's
right.
has lofty goals of being,
I was kind of pretty involved in the business had grown pretty dramatically over those years. So it was probably sixfold as large by then, if not more.
What's that like? What's it like as two people that aren't part of very many successful things? What's it like to be part of something wildly successful?
It's a thrill, and the bigger the enterprise gets, the more of a thrill it is. And but I think success kind of breeds success and makes you kind of want to do more. And so I think I was kind of in on that. And the internet was provided an opportunity for so much imagination, creativity, analytics, all things that I really liked. And just a world of discovery. I mean, that, within the organization we could discover, but also in the milieu of e-commerce, there was just a lot of discovery. I mean, like I said, the channels, 95, there's no affiliate channel. The search wasn't a big deal. Emails, there was probably some, but it really wasn't prominent. And then you think about, all the other things that followed in terms of some of the other kind of marketing. Mm-hmm. So, and just the ability to create a better mousetrap in terms of, I really enjoy that in terms of making a very efficient site.
Actually giving people what they want, I would always notice that with a lot of these things. It feels, on the one hand, you could look at it cynically from like a greedy capitalist standpoint where they're just trying to sell you something. But on the other hand, from the sort of symbiotic relation standpoint, if someone's walking in the shoe store, ostensibly they want to buy some shoes. So do we want to sell them some piece of crap shoe that they don't actually want, or do we want to hone in on that? And I find that, yeah, like to what you're saying, when you've got clicks and data and numbers that you can look at from what your website is spitting out, you can actually hone in on getting people to the thing that they actually want to buy. And
Right.
what a better world we all live in when people are doing that.
I think it started even at a very simple level that back in 95, 96, 14K, 19K modems
Sure.
were the way that things were communicated. And so one of the things I was very concerned about was how do you create a very efficient experience?
Sure.
And
Because you only have so much bandwidth that you can actually
right,
be working with.
and people that are shopping only have so much patience. I mean,
Yeah.
they're not interested in doing 20 clicks, even though that was not uncommon from the start of a purchase to consummating it in terms of a shopping cart, that it could take literally 20 clicks on some sites. My goal and what I say to people was I want them to be able to do it, at the most efficient level within 4 clicks of coming onto the site. And that was a thought that really became kind of a belief in the corporation that stayed to the very end in terms of always creating efficiency, of trying to really think about how do you make this the easiest kind of site to navigate. And the business got just a lot of compliments from consumers about how easy it was to use, even when we had 300 brands and thousands and tens of thousands of styles.
How were the compliments coming in?
Consumers would just do comments on the site.
Okay.
They might be on BizRate reviews.
Yeah.
Just there's other review areas
Yeah.
as well that the people, and we were always interested in feedback, so we always had surveys on the site. So
Were
that
the
people
stores still open at this point?
Yeah, I sold one of them before I sold the entire business, and I had a 5th store that was part of a warehouse location that we had, that when we had to move because
The
our
entire
growth
business,
needs.
meaning the brick and mortar stores, and transitioning to the online.
Yeah, so with the brick and mortar stayed. When I sold the business, there were still 3 stores, a couple in Virginia and one in Northeast Seattle.
Oh, recently. The most recent.
in
Okay.
2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it transitioned to mostly online. And I don't
I mean,
even
just
think-
as literally the retail stores
Right.
comprised like 1%.
Were they called onlineshoes.com, the retail
No,
stores?
so most of them were called Red Wing Shoe Stores.
Oh, okay.
So, and then one of them was called the Shoe Advantage. I converted the Northeast Seattle store to the Shoe Advantage because we carried a lot of outside product in the business. And for example, for New Balance and for Rockport, we were their largest independent dealer out of the retail stores in the Northwest region, which included Alaska and Hawaii. And that was one of the reasons that I had really good relationships with them. They were also very supportive of the business, especially New Balance. They were amazing in terms of the support that they offered.
What were some of the hardest lessons you learned with starting an internet business in the early age?
Hard lessons. I guess one of the hard knocks that happened several years after the online business was established is there were a lot of development companies that were out, looking to develop sites for different businesses.
Okay.
And we kind of thought that one is we had a static system up to that point, meaning that each page was an individually created page. And we wanted to go to a dynamic design, and we selected a company downtown Seattle that was a design company to help us with it.
Dynamic meaning it all works together?
Meaning
all
that it's
look
all
the
coming
same?
out of the database, as opposed to with a static site. Let's say you show the same shoe on 4 different pages. You'd have to go to those 4 pages to change the price.
Got it.
In a dynamic site, you make the change of the price in the database, and it populates
Okay.
on all the different pages
Got it.
throughout the site. So we went to this company and started working with them, and I'd say, I think it was at least 14 months later, they were going out of business. And I paid a little more than where they were to, and the point that they developed it to. And so we had to start from scratch. And that was basically a loss. And we got the code for what they developed. we had an expert come in and analyze it to sort of see, hey, is this something that we should try to build upon? And he came in, and his description was that it was spaghetti code, meaning that
Oh no!
it's not something that we would want to endeavor to do anything with. And so we debated whether to get an off-the-shelf product, but again, with the thought that we had about creating a very special design and having a lot of flexibility in terms of how we structure it, off-the-shelf just wasn't an attractive proposition. And so we ended up developing it internally, and had an outstanding tech group, pretty good size with developers. And
did it still feel like a family business to you at this point, or was it?
Yeah, no, it did.
beyond?
I think that's something that people that work in the company really appreciate. I know when I sold the business and I was going to transition out, I had a lot of people mention that it was really a unique work environment.
Did you try to cultivate that, or was it
Yeah,
just built
definitely.
into it?
I think for me, I wanted people spend a lot of time at work, and I would just want to make sure that people were enjoying their day. And one of the foundational values for me was respect. That's really demonstrated by everybody at work, and especially anybody in management that's going to have direct reports. That just people ought to be treated well. Their work ought to be recognized and acknowledged, and try to let them advance in different areas and create learning opportunities, both in terms of, we supported taking of courses and other things. So
Was your dad this open to sort of like personal growth and well-being?
Holistic employee mindset.
I think my dad was always thoughtful and considerate of people, and but he probably had 5 employees.
Yes.
We peaked at 200 plus, and so they're slightly different enterprises.
Sure.
But I thought it's just really important, regardless of the size, that we really try to maintain that and the personal contact. I think people felt that they worked for my company, and I think really went the extra effort to try to do a great job. And I think that was just kind of the relationship. I mean, they knew that I was very invested in making sure that we're doing things to create a good environment. I added all sorts of benefits throughout the years as I grew. From at one point had profit sharing, added health benefits, then had certain 401k plans. So they knew that I was interested in improved healthcare plans, and I think they had that. It's just because we were also working together a lot. The thing that I probably enjoyed most about the business was actually the working with the people there, and so I enjoyed going out and talking to people, and I talked to everybody, whether it's answering the phone or somebody on the warehouse floor or somebody in development. And it was just it wasn't like an effort or I thought I should do this. It's just something that I really enjoyed, and so I think it did create that kind of a family sense.
So you weren't reading like how to be the effective executive. You were just, I'm Dan, I'm going to answer the phone if it needs to be answered. Talk to people.
I think I read a lot as well, just because as the business grew and I didn't have a business background, I needed to be able to be thoughtful and
sitting down. How are you feeling today? Tell me a little more.
Yeah.
But I wanted, I think probably most business people that run their own business, you have a real sense of responsibility, right? There's a lot of families, a lot of people. I mean, you might have 200 employees, but then you think about family members and others, and it's a large group. So you want to make sure that you're making good decisions, and then in terms of being respectful of people in the company, you want to make sure that you're managing it in a way that is respectful of their time. You're organized in a certain way. You're providing up, making sensible decisions. So I think it's all integrated in terms of the whole process. But I think it's critical to acquire new knowledge, and especially in the internet space, that was a very dynamic area. Things were just changing. It was so fast. And in our business, we enjoyed triple-digit growth for many years, even when the business got to be of a substantial size. And so that created a lot of demands, and that we had to be smart about and make sure that we were really prepared for and understood.
Were you competitive with places like Zappos, or did it not really concern you?
It was hard to not know that they were out there. Zappos had tremendous business.
Here they are over there.
great success. So I was always aware of what they were doing, and trying to keep abreast of how they're doing. And I'm at Tony Hsieh, who was their CEO, and on several occasions, and I visited one of their facilities. So I was definitely aware of that, and I think I was probably more competitive in terms of our success. I mean, I kind of figured like if we were doing well in terms of growing and so forth, that it would kind of take care of the other things
sort
as
of
well.
Internally rather than comparing yourself to others.
Yes and no. I mean, I think that, again, part of the thing to be smart about how you run a business is you've got to know what the competition is doing. I mean, are they offering a lot of feature sets, for example, that you're not offering on your site? Are they offering policies that make you non-competitive? So I think you do need to kind of see what's the experience like elsewhere. And I think everybody was looking in the industry was looking at one another and sort of saying, hey, how are they doing this? And is there something new? Is there a different way to feature things? But I think we were very groundbreaking on a lot of things in terms of our approach.
When you ultimately, when Zappos ultimately becomes this mega giant that is casting a major shadow on the industry over everyone else, do you end up deviating from what the ultimate objective is or what the strategy is on your own end and say, okay, well, we're not gonna overtake this thing, so we're gonna end up working in this new angle or this new avenue and making that our own?
Well, I think there's two things, and one is you just have to be realistic about your capabilities. And financially, Zappos had a tremendous amount in venture capital that allowed it to do things that, with my wherewithal, I was not, and with my interest in terms of how I wanted to grow the business, that was not going to be an option. And I always thought it's really important to find a way to kind of individuate your business, find something that's unique. And so we found different things that we did that had different focuses than some of our competitors, and which I think people that shopped our site appreciated. I was going to say something else about that. What was that? Oh, I think that Zappos also, they're very smart people and had, I really respect their strategy, and that from the start, they knew that they aren't going to be a shoe company. They had a very large vision of really being an e-commerce site that would have a lot of different areas. And they developed clothing, and before they were acquired by Amazon, they had many other areas. And I think that a large reason why Amazon acquired them wasn't just for the shoes, but they had a tremendous brand, and I think that there was concern that this is a mini-me, if you will, and that this could be a competitor that would be tough, especially because of their reputation. And so I think that that was not a direction. I was not going to get into all these other product categories, and my vision wasn't to become an Amazon-like business. So it kind of still kept me on the path of, I certainly wanted to expand. We did some clothing, we did some other products, but it was still, in a relative sense, a very narrow focus relative to the expansive e-commerce perspective that those companies held.
Was there a sweet spot with the size of the company where you felt like you could still adhere to these sort of outside of the actual business interactions, things that you found important, the workplace culture and the sort of philosophy of running a business that you had? Did it become untenable when you had so many people, or was it just this constant sort of tweaking of your own process to be able to make it work for the employee base as a whole?
Sure, I think that's an interesting question. I'm sure that there would be a point probably where we would have grown to where some of that wouldn't have been as tenable. I think the fundamental things, something in terms of corporate values, I think they hold regardless of size.
Sure.
Some of the practical things, if we had 2,000 employees, I probably wouldn't know each of them.
Sure. Yeah, right.
And be able to visit with them and so forth. But then I think you take that concept, but that's something that you value, that kind of personal contact and making sure that people know that management is accessible and is interested. Then different VPs have to take part of that role. Different managers and directors have to take that role.
Would you explicitly say this to people under you?
Yeah,
VPs?
absolutely. Yeah.
This is our philosophy. This is what I want. I want you guys to be accessible.
Yeah, and one of the things that we did, we had executive meetings every Wednesday morning, and we started off with just the executive team asking about accomplishments in the company who really stood out this week. And it could be somebody in customer service, it could be somebody in marketing, it could be whomever. And then really part of the effort was that as an executive team, that we would all try to kind of say something to that individual in recognition of their outstanding work.
That's a really, I admire that way of running a business. I wish I had worked for more businesses like
It's
that.
kind of bizarre that more don't seem to invest in the human capital that they even have in the moment, and
well, it seems to come from a place of
actually
depth.
reciprocate it.
You seem to understand business as beyond simply generating revenue, more and more revenue, growing the business to greater and greater heights. It's
Yep,
like
and I also think that to achieve greater height, I mean, there has to be personal acknowledgement.
Yeah.
And I think for any CEO to think that they're just kind of the reason for the company's success is pretty arrogant. Look, I'm not saying it never happens that a CEO, but usually you've got great people, and I know that Online Shoes would have never enjoyed the success it had were it not for really outstanding individuals. And there's some individuals that just made tremendous contributions and to the company achieving the heights that it did.
Did you ever have any trouble with making decisions that didn't necessarily make you feel good?
I kind of think that a necessary decision is just one that you have to make. And
Yeah.
so I think I'm pretty much a rationalist about that.
Yeah.
And so, it's never pleasant to let somebody go. I mean, that's probably one of the worst things about a job is that, you're really impacting somebody's life.
Yeah.
So those were...
Especially when you know them. I mean,
Yeah.
it seems like you made a point to meet these people beyond just employee X, Y, Z.
I think part of the thing that we did, which actually helped in terms of making it slightly easier, was we gave people a lot of opportunities. I mean, we never kind of came to somebody and said, "Oh, well, we're just not happy with your work, and thank you for your time here.
Yeah.
Go on." Some would say that we put in maybe too much time in terms of, so we do coaching, we we certainly let them know if their performance wasn't there that, hey, we'd love to see you step up on this, and, we might work with them more. So I think that if a termination occurred, there's certainly no surprise element to it. And I think, I had many people that say, hey, I really appreciate everything you did. I know you tried, and I just didn't get there or whatever. It makes it easier to let somebody go. I think, when you do layoffs, that's a little bit different. And we had to do a few. They weren't very large, but we had to do a few of those. And there, I think you just look at kind of, it's again the concept that you have 200 families, and you have to preserve that. You can't go under because you might have to go reduce your workforce by 5% or something. So it's something you hate to do, but there's a greater concern there. And I think too at those points, to be honest, and this is not something terrific, but oftentimes when you're at those layoffs, you really look at people that maybe we're slightly underperforming. Obviously, you're not going to send your best talent away during those, and so you have to make the best of a bad situation.
Was the decision to eventually sell the company one of those decisions? Was it difficult, or was it sort of a necessary decision?
No, it was neither difficult
Did it feel
or
like a
necessary.
layoff?
Yeah, I was
No,
going to say
no.
you
But it
reduced
feels like a promotion.
you reduced employees by 100% by selling everything. So can we let's get the timeline of events here going so we know where we are. You started the company in mid 90s, and you basically became mostly online related.
Right.
And then in 2014,
It was sold.
you sold the company to Canadian investors.
Right.
Also, full disclosure, I was an employee of Dan's at that time. Hi, boss. Hi, Dan, the boss.
We weren't going to tell you folks, but Karl wants to get himself back in that industry.
I was working for the company at the time, so first-hand account, I was in the mix, and I got fired by Dan and rehired by a bunch of Canadian guys who came in and took over the company more or less as is. But as we'll get to a little later, that the as is started to go away. But how did you get to that point? We're sitting in, let's say 2014-ish. How do you end up selling this huge online business. Not only that, but your dad's business with
Right.
your dad's name on it. How do you get to that point?
I think it's something that was a culmination of a lot of factors. So it wasn't like there's, this one thing that made me think, oh, yeah, I just have to get out of the business. I think one is I've always had this hourglass approach to life and looking at how much sand is left on the top. And I knew there were a lot of things I wanted to experience in life outside of just the business realm. And things that I'm doing now, like being able to be active in different programs at the UW. I do some mentoring at the business school. I'm on the board of the philosophy department. I'm sitting in on classes, some other activities. And I love that. I just wanted to expand my learning and different experiences. I work probably, on average, probably at least 70 hours a week. It should became limiting. It was limiting in terms of family time, time with friends. Travel was much more constrained. And I wanted to do those things in abandon. And last year, and this isn't going to be the norm, but I traveled 120 days. So having that ability to do things and see things and to study, those were all things I wanted. So that was experiencing different things in life was a really big factor in this.
And
Almost-
you had been thinking about this for a while.
Quite a while.
And almost totally sort of personal, that personal journey. We're
Right.
now back to 21-year-old Dan thinking, I think I want to be a philosophy major, a philosophy graduate program.
Increase my knowledge base.
Yeah.
And, the world is pretty fascinating. There's so many areas that you can go and research, and especially if there's areas that you're really unfamiliar with, I find that to be the nicest because, pretty much anything you read, for me, it would be like if I read something about astronomy, it's all going to be new.
Sure.
And I love that discovery of, geez, never knew that, didn't think about that.
Sure.
So I think that's something I liked. I think,
So there was this itch, and it was getting itchier and itchier and itchier.
Yeah, right.
And then eventually,
and so that was just one factor.
Okay.
I think that basically from a financial standpoint, all my eggs were in one basket, and I was getting older to where, my time to recover if something didn't work well was not going to be as great. I'd recover by age 75. But that doesn't match very well with the goal that I just stated in terms of being able to do other things. So I think that it became more of a financial risk to me that I just didn't want to have that great of an exposure. And I wasn't, you could say, well, there's a lot of ways to solve that. You could get, raise some equity, and there was that opportunity. I don't know, the market was terrific for that, but also I like the simplicity that I was the sole owner. I could make the decisions, and I didn't have to be beholden to others in terms of business decision making.
Did you think that would be a potential sacrifice of these sort of core values that you actually, all of a sudden, if you've got other people who are monetarily involved in the decision-making process, then there's too many cooks in the kitchen to some degree?
Yeah, and just business decisions. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that, what they say about, Wall Street companies, right, is they're making their decision based on quarter-to-quarter earnings. And I think that could definitely played out in an internet business that, investors would say, we want to see this return. Well, I was clearly interested in generating profits on a quarterly basis, but I'd make decisions too for the long-term opportunity. Sure. And given that I was funding this business, I had to generate profits. And but that leads to another domain that I think at the end, I probably felt like I was a little bit of a governor on the business, that my financial wherewithal and my lack of interest in taking on additional debt was pretty low. And so that would limit the store's growth opportunity, or the internet business growth opportunity. And really from a standpoint for employees and so forth, I wanted to have somebody that could come in. And we saw so many opportunities and so many things that we could do. And we were limited. We could only have so many developers. Well, it would have been nice to add, to the headcount of developers by 30%, or to some other domains. And that was going to be it was challenging for me to be able to do that. So I really thought for the business as well, along with those other factors in my deliberations, that would be a good thing to have people that are well capitalized come in and be able to really allow the business to grow in a more significant fashion.
So how do you actually go about selling a business? Trevor and I were joking beforehand. Do you put a Craigslist ad up that says "business for sale"? Contact Dan, and then you put a phone number. And
I created a yard sign. I set in the lobby of the building,
and people tear off a little piece of paper on the bottom, and that's
Like
got your
shoes?
yeah,
I got the place for
it's
you.
got your email address on it. How do you go
So-
about selling a multi-million-dollar company?
So usually you work with and I say usually, but probably 98% of the time you work with an investment bank. I mean, you could be approached privately or talk privately with another company, but even with those kind of conversations, one often involves an investment banker.
You've got a middleman financial institution that's sort of guiding the seller with potential buyers.
Yes, so they're really kind of the conduit to interested parties,
Sure.
and you try to find an investment bank that understands the space that you're in, has contacts with other parties that your business would fit in well, and so they're very instrumental in that role. And I'd approached them a couple of times over the years. The first time I approached them was in 2008, and as we know, the market went very south.
Sure.
Third quarter of 2008, just due to the real estate boom, and obviously what we call the Great Recession.
Sure.
So that wasn't very successful. On the first day that I met with a potential interested party, the Dow Jones had its biggest one-day drop in history, and everybody was in.
Call you back, Dan.
Such a good time to open up your checkbook and just start writing zeros on that.
The shoe guy's on the phone. Not today.
Not interested. Wow. Okay.
And I wasn't in a position where there's a financial necessity that there's no desperation on the part.
Sure.
If the right offer came in,
Yeah.
I would have been happy
Sure.
to sell at that point. I tried again in 2012, and again it didn't come. The offers weren't interesting enough, and then it was kind of just a fortuitous event that in 2014, the Canadian company that we mentioned earlier. We had some conversations. We were thinking about maybe doing some joint things together. We both were interested in having, some private makeup product, so where you can order from a company to produce certain patterns of models of shoes, styles. And so we were looking at that, and then in the conversations, we kind of sensed that they were interested in growth and creating a new business. And so at some point, as we were talking about different opportunities, we just flat out asked them, would you be interested in potentially acquiring us? And they expressed an interest, and within 2-3 days, Bob Barton, who was the CFO and then eventually became the COO and president of the company, he and I went up to Canada and met with them at their facility, a business that they had just sold. We had conversations, and I'd say within 3 months or so, the business transacted.
And you ultimately perceived it as them doing the things that you weren't entirely gung-ho about doing, about this growth, about...
They're going to treat my baby right.
Yeah. You saw that as a...
It's not that I wasn't interested in pursuing. I think I kind of felt that, I probably reached, given my risk tolerance and interest in greater debt, that I'd kind of peaked. They definitely were in a position that they were very well capitalized. This was not going to be a big deal for them. They had some grand vision, and I thought they sounded and described themselves as very interested in investing in the business. And they touted that they were looking to make this $1 billion business within a few years. So all of that sounded good. I thought it was going to be a good opportunity for the team. And so that motivated me. The outcome didn't turn out to be that, in fact. But as best I could tell when we were conducting, the conversations, that was, in fact, how it looked.
So what was that like? So this was a many years leading up to this process, but what was it like on the actual day when the paperwork is being signed and your dad's company is no longer your company anymore?
I think that I'm not very emotional about the business things, and my dad had been out of it for so long.
Or not?
I'm not.
Okay.
So that was 33 years after I took over the business, and he was out of the business effectively for that length of time. So I should say I emotionally, but sentimentally, it just wasn't a huge thing for me. And I felt I was exceptionally happy. I mean, it was just, there's no downside. There's no negative emotions associated with it. You know, I think the one negative was kind of that I really enjoyed the team. And being out of that, I mean, it was just, you know, in some ways it was a large part of my social life as well.
Sure.
Spending, you know, a lot of time at work and interacting with people all day. So there's lots of working with people that I really enjoyed working with and have become friends. And I'm still, you know, I'm in touch with quite a few people in the company now, just on a personal friendship basis. So that, but other than that, I kind of feel like, well, you know, things, you know, life goes through transitions, and this was just a normal and for me a desirable life transition to be able to achieve some other things that I was very interested in doing.
So you're very zen about this. You're very like, you're attached to it to the point where you care about the people, but the accomplishment of like building up an online industry, essentially building up an online shoe industry, you felt you weren't beholden to it to the point where you're like, I want to hold on to this a little bit longer because it's my baby and I'm the one that made it good and you. No,
and I think that part of the thing that contributed to my success was always the desire to go forward, to try new things. And I think if you have that mindset, then also selling the business is part of that, going forward, of trying new things, of going into a different area. And I was never apprehensive about making those kind of changes and commitments. And so I think for me, it felt like it fit the mold.
How did it feel some year later when you found out the business was now bankrupt?
You know, well, it's 2.5 years since, you know, between the time that I sold it and when it went bankrupt. Obviously disappointing to hear about that. It would have been nice to be able to still point to an online shoe website, and there's some possibility that will still occur.
A little teaser.
But
a cliffhanger, folks.
So, not anything related to me.
Sure.
But
just type in onlineshoes.com in your web browser and keep hitting refresh and see what happens.
Coming soon.
But,
in the old store format where you enter
we're going back
the
to
elevator.
The
elevator's
original
back.
retro throwback page.
But it was recently sold.
Yes.
And so it'll depend and it was sold in two parts. There was part that was sold in the U.S., part that was sold in Canada. And so the parties that acquired the business, they have capabilities, and I don't know the ins and outs of that, but it sounds like they may want to retain the site. So, and again, I don't have any independent kind of, you know, it's not like I got this firsthand from anybody.
Sure.
You think your dad would be proud of where you took the business?
Yeah, I think he was skeptical. He thought I was a loon, basically, for many years. But then he kind of saw the success of the business, and that became an important conversation piece between us. He loved to hear about the
you
success.
were able to talk to him.
Yeah, of the online business, and he was very interested. I mean, that would be something he'd always tease me about. I want to just go back to one other point that you guys were asking about, and you know, it's kind of how did I feel about the business and with it kind of going bankrupt and the people. I think that one thing that has made it a little easier is that the people that left the organization, either through their own means or were fired or at the end, there were very few original Online Shoes employees left when the business basically went bankrupt. But the economy has been so good that everybody that I've heard from, people have found great jobs and things that they're really happy with. I think if it had been in an environment like during the .com bust, when people didn't find jobs in the industry again, it would have been harder to kind of see that. But with this vibrant economy in e-commerce, and especially in an area like Seattle, it was nice. I love hearing about their continued success and what they've accomplished, the new challenges, and the people are happy. So I think that made it a lot. Under different circumstances, my feelings about it could have been quite different.
Do you have a message to anyone? I'm fixated on your dad thinking you're a loon component of all this. Do you have a message to anyone that has a similar situation that has an idea that someone else thinks it's crazy, and it might not be crazy? What would you say to that person?
What would I say to other loons?
Yeah, to the fellow crazy people out there.
I think I tell them to listen to what's being told to them, which might seem a little bit like an oxymoron
Sure.
here. But, I wasn't going on a prayer. I mean, I entered into the online business. I really gave it a try. I was sufficiently profitable from the store businesses that I had at the time to fund it. I wasn't putting anything great at risk. I tried it. I saw where it was going, and it looked very promising. And so that some people were uneasy with it, and I had a couple of very close friends that definitely, even once it had kind of gotten going, were dissuading me from continuing to pursue it. And I just kind of felt, I can appreciate their feelings, but I have a deeper understanding of what's going on here, and that I had a good basis on which to believe that it would continue to be successful, and that I was not going to go bankrupt or have some huge personal losses. And so I think you have to be analytic about these situations. And sometimes when people come and tell you, hey, you need to take a look at your business, and this doesn't seem like a very clever business decision, sometimes those are great. That can be very helpful advice. But at other times, if people don't have as good an understanding of how your business works, then it really it doesn't contribute to anything, because it doesn't come from a foundation of understanding.
Well, that's the show, folks. Thank you for coming on the show, Dan. We appreciate it.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I enjoyed it.
As always, look for us at Anxiety Club Podcast on Facebook.com, Instagram. We have a website coming soon and a Patreon page.
We have a YouTube channel.
With new streams.
See this video. If you're listening to this podcast right now, go to YouTube, type in Anxiety Club, and you'll see me and Trevor and Dan in Dan's kitchen right now.
And we're currently looking for business sponsors. If you want to donate coffee to the show or get involved in any way, shoot us an email at anxietyclubpodcast@gmail.com. Or if you're a listener and interested in donating to the show, helping it get going, please shoot money over to
PayPal.me/Karl Benitez. That's PayPal.me/KarlBenitez.
Thanks for listening, folks. Take care.
You keep saying you got something for me, something you call love, but confess you've been a messin' where you shouldn't have been a messin', and now someone else is getting all your best. These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days these boots are gonna walk all over you. Yeah. You keep lying when you ought to be truthin', and you keep losing when you ought to not bet. You keep saying when you ought to be a-changin'. Now what's right is right, but you ain't been right yet. These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days these boots are gonna walk all over you. You keep playing where you shouldn't be playing, and you keep thinking that you'll never get burned. Ha! I just found me a brand new box of matches, yeah. And what he knows you ain't had time to learn. These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days these boots are gonna walk all over you. Are you ready, Boots? Start walking.